Hi everybody and welcome to Observing with Webb for June of 2015. June starts out as a pretty boring month, not really all that much going on, and then ends up being pretty exciting with Jupiter and Venus coming together, having a conjunction, which is a word I don't normally use in these, and also we've got the moon joining in, and we also have the summer solstice. So I'm going to talk about the planets first that we can see, and then I'll talk about some of the events using the moon as our guide, and then talk about some constellations that you can see. So let's get started with the planets. Now, the most interesting ones are going to be Venus and Jupiter. Now, let me go to June 1st, okay? And on June 1st, let me get a little bit darker. Let's say 9:30. On June 1st, you can see Venus and Jupiter pretty darn close to each other. In fact, if we actually measure the angle, it looks like they're about 20 degrees apart at the beginning of the month. That's about 2 fist widths held at arm's length. And so what's going to happen is throughout the month, you'll notice that they get closer and closer together, okay, until June 30th, which is when they are the closest that they're going to be. And they're only about half a degree apart. Now, that means that you can potentially see, both of these in the same field of view in a pair of binoculars, or maybe even in a telescope, depending on your setup. But I mean, if you take a look, Venus, that's about as big as Venus is. That's about as big as Jupiter's. They're about the same size. So you can see Jupiter's moons here. And Venus, you can even see the crescent phase toward the end of the month, slightly crescent, probably closer to half than it is to crescent. But anyway, that's going on in the western sky throughout the month, okay? So those are the two planets you can see in the western sky, at least around sunset. Now let me go back to June 15th, average day of the month, I guess you could say, and let's zoom out and go across the ecliptic. Oh, there we see Saturn. Saturn's already going to be up in the southeast. And what you'll see is that Saturn is going to travel across the sky and set in the southwest right about sunrise, depending on what time you're out or what day of the month you're out. So we've got Jupiter and Venus in the west. We've got Saturn in the east. And if you're really good, which I am not, if you go toward the end of the month, okay, let's just say June 30th, and you look east, you might just be able to see Mercury pop up. Now, the dawn and dusk on Starry Night is a little different than it is in reality, but still, that's a little low for me. I'm not going to go out and try to see it. I'm going to focus this month on checking out Saturn. I'm going backwards through time now in a day. Saturn moving across the sky. And right around sunset, I'm going to take a look at Jupiter and Venus. Those are my main objectives for this month. Now, Mars, you just can't see it. It's on the opposite side of the sun, so no use even trying. But that's it. Those are the planets that you can see in June. So let's take a look at the moon, and let's start at June 1st. Now, if we look at June 1st, you'll see the moon is not in the west. The moon is, oh, look at that, close to Saturn. In fact, it's 1 day shy of being a full moon, and you'll see the moon and Saturn pretty close together in the sky. In fact, I believe it's about 3 degrees up and to the right. And this is what it looks like as the night goes on. Okay, you'll see Scorpius here, Libra up here, if you can make it out. It's pretty dim. But you've got Saturn and the moon right near each other. So if you have trouble finding Saturn, go out on the 1st and it'll be nearby. It's also going to happen on the 28th as well, but we'll get there later. Okay, so then technically the full moon is on June 2nd. That means the moon is, let's go back, it's rising right about sunset, and then it's going across the whole sky as the night goes on and sets right about when the sun is rising, about 5:30, somewhere around there. So what's going to happen is let me pull this back to like 3 a.m. So nothing really is going to happen in the next 2-3 weeks, except the moon is just going to be moving. So let's say it's 3 a.m. The moon is going to keep moving to the left, to the east, and it's getting less full and less full until June 9th, when we have the last quarter moon. Okay, that's when the left half of the moon is lit up. Okay, and you can only really see it from about, let's say from about midnight until the morning. Okay, then basically the same sort of stuff happens, where another day goes by, the moon gets thinner and thinner and lower in the sky until the 16th, which is the new moon. Okay, that's when they are actually, the moon and the sun are essentially in the same spot in the sky, as you can kind of see here, the moon being right there. Okay, so new moon gives us darkest skies because there's no light pollution from the moon, and it means that the moon is now going to a sunset object. So we're going to switch to sunset, and we're going to look to the west. Okay, and let's move to the 19th and the 20th. Because what happens on the 19th and the 20th? Well, we start seeing the moon as a crescent, very thin crescent, but then we see Venus directly above the moon on the 19th, and Jupiter up and to the left a little bit more on the 19th. And in fact, if you're really good, you might be able to find the beehive cluster. And so Jupiter, Venus, and the beehive cluster make a line with the moon below it. And then what's going to happen is on the 20th, the moon will be a little bit thicker, and it will have moved over. So now you've got beehive cluster, bright Venus, bright Jupiter, and the moon down here, which is just very neat to see that many celestial objects in one spot. Okay. Let's see, what's next? Oh, the 21st. Well, the moon's only really just moved over a little bit, but that's the summer solstice. That's the longest day of the year and the shortest night of the year. And there's an explanation on Podbean. There's some links there that'll help you out if you want to know more about that. But that's the basic idea. Then let's watch the moon over the next couple of days. See how it's a crescent, and it's a thicker crescent, thicker crescent, thicker crescent. Oh, on the 24th, that's the first quarter moon. That's when the right half of it is lit up. Okay? And it's visible from sunset until about midnight, and you might even be able to see it during the day. I know I've been able to see that during the day, even starting around like 2 p.m. Then, see the moon there. Next day, it's moved over. Oh, practically runs into Saturn. So on the 28th, if we look for Saturn, or if we look for the moon, we can find Saturn right below it. In fact, only about 1 degree below. That's pretty good. You can definitely get that in a zoom lens with your camera, maybe even with a telescope. But that's just really, really cool to see the moon and Saturn close together. So if you have trouble finding Saturn, use the moon on the 28th and it'll be right there. Okay. And lastly, actually, I already talked about this, but the only thing that happens next is, well, if you're looking at 28th, Jupiter and Venus are close, but the next night they're even closer, and on the 30th, they're as close as they're going to get. Okay, they're within half a degree, and you can see them in binoculars. I'd love to see someone take a picture of that. I'm sure somebody out there will. Yeah, those are the events for June. Just real quick, I want to fly through some constellations that you can see. So let me go to the average day, June 15th. Let's scroll out. Okay. And let's take a big look at the sky. Okay, if you're around 10 p.m., you'll be able to see Booties right above you. And what I like to do is I like to use Booties and the Big Dipper as sort of guideposts. So if we look at, if we look at the western sky, northwestern sky, see the Big Dipper up here. What you can do is you can take the handle of the Big Dipper and you can follow that arc that it makes to the brightest star in Bootes, which is called Arcturus. Okay? And that's how you get to Bootes. Now, if you follow that same arc to Arcturus, you can then speed on to Spica, the brightest star in Virgo, which I like to think of Virgo as the Dickinson mermaid, but that's only between me and my fellow Dickinson grads. But it's a dim one. It's hard to see Virgo, but if you have dark enough skies, you should be able to find it. But anyway, then what I like to look at is if you take the Big Dipper and take the middle cup ones, and follow those down, they will lead you right there to Regulus, which is the brightest star in Leo. And Leo has that backward question mark and the right triangle right here. So you got Leo, you've got the Big Dipper, you follow the arc of the Big Dipper to Arcturus to get to Bootes, and if you follow that arc to Arcturus, then you speed on to Spica. Some other ones to look for, I would say, would be Scorpius over here with Saturn. Sagittarius, I can see that in the morning pretty clearly. And in fact, up above, if you're looking around midnight, you can find Hercules and the Corona Borealis, which are neat. And if you zoom into Hercules, you can see the Hercules cluster if you have a good telescope or binoculars. Let's see. Oh, there's Lyra, one of the summer constellations. You can find the Ring Nebula. Whoops. In there as well, if you've got a good telescope. Okay. And yeah, I think I'm going to stop there for constellations. I think that's a bunch of them for you. With just another last thing would be look at Cygnus, the swan, and you've got a big swath of the Milky Way going right through that, which is also very neat to see. And again, if you're looking at Sagittarius or Scorpius, you see a lot of the Milky Way in there as well. So anyway, I hope that you have very clear dark skies for the month of June, and I really hope that you get out to see Jupiter and Venus this month, which is not going to happen for a very long time. So clear dark skies to you all.